right. This commences our HR Business Services Committee meeting for April. It's about 4:39, and the first thing we have on our agenda today is a guest presentation for this meeting, and it is Becky Crane.
Thank you, members of the board. I'm here to talk to you about EQUIP, or what's known as Evidence-Based Practices in Early Intervention. And this has been, I think, like a 2-year journey to get to a place where we've been accepted for this innovation and awarded a grant just over $17,000. What we'll do with this grant is provide some robust professional development for our staff who serve our birth to 2 children with special needs. So Minnesota is a birth mandate state, so we get going quite early with families, and this initiative talks about great home visiting practices, and the money is decelerating. The first year is quite a big chunk of money, and then it kind of really tapers off from like $15,000 to $1,000 or less each year, and it's sustainable. So we're really excited to go through an implementation science initiative, innovation, and help children and families with special needs. Just wanted to celebrate that.
So if you didn't know, Becky's our early childhood special education coordinator, TOSA, and her and her team did a lot of research-based steps in this process. We did not rush into this, and the Minnesota Department of Ed provides special education a lot of opportunities to go after grants. Grants at times can be complex and cumbersome, especially the data collection process and the expectations that MDE has. This is a no-cost problem for the district. We're not adding extra people because of this. It is simply a nice professional development opportunity within early childhood. And we took our time to go after this opportunity, and as Becky said, a 2-year cycle really had a lot of steps in the process, which implementation science would recommend. So just another example of the district doing the right steps to bring in an initiative. So thanks, Becky. I always like to have people like Becky come before you and get to see who they are.
And this is under our grant applications, I see it under.
Yep.
And then, so just so I can clarify, so this would be for training of our staff that go into home for the 0 to 2, for the wee
Yes.
ones, the
Exactly.
newly baked ones. That's awesome. Thank you so much. This is great. I really appreciate that, this work.
And thanks for being willing to come.
Yes.
Thanks for letting us
sweating,
highlight
but
this.
you're
It's pretty important to us, so thanks for letting us
It's
talk about it.
great, and I'll make sure to point this out when we do our meeting summary during the school board meeting, because I know a lot of the other school board members would really be interested in this.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you.
But don't let us talk early.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. What a great way to start off the meeting though, huh?
Yeah.
And you're welcome to stay.
Well, you don't have to laugh that hard, I mean.
We'll double it tonight.
I do want to note that Jason did come into my office and said, we look like we're the last thing on the agenda. Is there any way? I'm like, for you, Jason, anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great way to start out the meeting, so awesome. So now we move on to our departmental reports, right?
Yep.
And so we start out with HR.
And our human resource director is actually out recruiting staff today at a job fair, and so she did provide in board book her March activities. So just curious if, I don't know that Superintendent Megas and I could answer many of the questions. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, the items that they've been working through, and then some of the hiring updates, as well as the contract negotiation progress that we have.
I bet I have a question you can answer though. So when it comes to the PEIP, the premiums that the increase there of about 6%, is that in line with what we've seen previously? Is it down, or what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, so it's slightly down from the last 2 years. It is up from our, often we hear about like our 10 or 11-year average, which has been lower, but it is similar to what we've seen in the past 2 years. And it was, you see that number, but to us, that's over $1 million.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So that is an increase to the budget of about $1 million?
Yep.
Okay. And was that similar to what we saw last year?
Yeah,
In terms of like overall cost.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I also just wanted to bring it to the attention, the health and wellness apps I think are important, the work that we're doing to make sure our staff are paying attention to their own needs when it comes to mental health. They can't help the mental health of our students unless they're feeling, you know,
Yeah,
okay too.
we're appreciative of Shanna and the work that she's provided. I think there's gonna be some more discussion on what that might look like as a more comprehensive component piece of what we do for our staff, and we look forward to having some more information from her and a little bit more dialogue with her. Her proposal has some really neat things, but I think there's some things that we may want to have some further discussion on, and how do we implement that over time. So we really appreciate the work she did bringing that forward.
Great. And then just of note, later on under the resolutions, we're gonna be looking at the approval of the paraprofessional employees collective bargaining agreement and the DFT.
Yes.
That's just the best news to talk about.
And then in other negotiations news there, as you can see, we're working together with our principals, and our next meeting is on the 14th. Directors are on hold because it's partly impacted by principal work. And we have Fairman and Oilers clerical coming up as well, and these being confirmed for the remaining groups. So we're
And those remaining groups, which are the remaining groups? The acronyms I'm always
The
unfamiliar with.
DUIAs are kind of our district-wide coordinators. Our non-certified business are hodgepodge of some technology folks, some facilities folks, some coordinators, and then our executive administrative team is part administrators and a few clericals.
Okay, and so we're on track. You guys are comfortable with where we're at?
Yep.
As we work through these negotiations?
Yeah.
Love it, awesome. And I was gonna go back and look to see what our openings look like from this meeting compared to last meeting, but I didn't get a chance, but just from what I'm thinking, it looks about the same.
Yep.
Okay, great, okay, thank you. So now that we've done our HR monthly departmental report, let's move on to business services and start out with our finance department report that will be verbal.
So one thing I wanted to share that is verbal is that last week we were contacted by Moody's, which is a ratings organization that evaluates our district's financial health, and they provide outlooks and recommendations to those that are looking at our district when we may issue bonds or other financial tools. And each time that a district either sells bonds or does a refinancing or a refunding, we work through that process. And so you've heard me in the past 3 years, we've had several conversations with Moody's and different ratings pieces. But this time around is their annual review of the district, and then they would provide additional information. And there is going to be a press release coming out from Moody's. I'm very excited to say that our underlying credit rating moved up 2 notches from a BA1 to a BAA2.
A1 to a B
Double
A2, not to be confused with BA2.
Or BA.
Or BA.
So this was, Simone and I were on the call with the representative from Moody's, and then when the information is reviewed, then our financial advisors support and look over our recommendations from Moody's, and we were so excited to see that we continue to have a positive outlook. Just this past, not our last refunding, but the refunding before, we were at a negative outlook as a district, and we've since then moved from positive, but then also to move up 2 steps. We're in a position where we can consider ourselves an investment grade rating versus a lesser rating where we were in the past. And as we all know, that part of that was our historical fund balance and challenges that we had here as a school district prior to 2019. But since then, we have moved forward very positively on slowly being growth in our fund balance, and been working really hard as a school district. And I think those things, along with showing additional financial stability at this time, obviously the ESSER funding and those component pieces, I think have helped that. They recognize that we have seen some enrollment losses, but we have overall been we have been stabilized as a district in terms of enrollment. So just wanted to share that piece as a verbal, that just happened this afternoon, so I didn't have a chance to put it in our agenda specifically. Yes?
Do you remember what bond rating we were at when you first arrived in the district?
Oh, I don't, but I'll go look, because it wasn't great.
Right, I just thought you'd take the opportunity to toot your horn.
Yeah.
And
At the school
I'd
board.
also like to toot her horn as well. She has done a tremendous job in getting us into a much better place financially. And I know that's taken a lot of hard work, especially when she works with a lot of people who like to spend money on programs. So we all try and be strategic and work together.
I do have to say that a whole team of people, including our school board, who made commitments to make sure that we have a balanced budget and that we have been moving towards growing our fund balance and talking about how we need to create that sustainability. It wouldn't be possible without our whole team having that better understanding of where we are. So I'm just excited to share it, and I think that, you know, even though at this moment in time we don't have any need to be selling bonds, just knowing that the financial condition that's being recognized as a school district moving forward, I think is just something to celebrate.
And I know we did some bond restructuring last year.
So we have restructured everything we can right now.
Oh.
We've hit the ceiling of those things that we can
Okay.
refund, and we did really well. I mean, I'm actually recalling I hadn't yet started at the school district, and the board was considering a refunding, and I called the former superintendent. I said, "Could you please hold on that, because I don't think now's the time, and I know I don't work for you yet, but you do what you need to do, but I'm feeling like, you know, we should hold." And in the end, we doubled the savings in 2 months by waiting and looking at it from a really holistic standpoint. So, and our financial advising team of R.W. Baird has been so helpful for us to really be strategic about when we do refundings. And if you recall, when we did maybe our second or third refunding, we did change the structure and the timeline of some of our payments, but what that did overall was going to create some stability in our levy going into the future, so that we wouldn't see these ebbs and flows, because we had so many original bond issuances at different levels and different times, and they had different expirations. We really were able to clean that up and walk through that, and we may have to go back in time and enjoy those video recordings of when we had Matt Ratchiffa from R.W. Baird come and kind of talk through how we did those restructurings. And I do think that we have positioned ourselves, at least from a debt service standpoint, in a really stable position. And as you know, back in November, Member Trinka, our former HR finance leader, we worked to transition from doing pay-as-you-go long-term facilities maintenance, or LTFM, to that bond sale, so that we did that in advance, and that was all part of that sustainability piece of collecting those and paying those bonds over time, so that Dave Spooner and his team could be reactive to projects rather than waiting and having the levy go up and down because of supply chain issues and other things. So that was another real positive thing, that having that support and discussion that we had over several months before we made that decision back in November and December was really positive. So thanks for that.
That's great news. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Other than that, as a finance team and a finance department, I know Simone has her lists of items that are on the consent agenda that she'll go through, but it's been a very busy time here at Duluth Public Schools. We'll be coming forward with some information related to the budget soon. You'll be seeing that as a general topic at our April 26th regular school board meeting, and we'll be providing an overview in advance to the board so that they can understand. But that's our normal big picture item, and then we'll be preparing to have our committee of the whole meeting so that the whole board can participate in the budget process.
Yeah, and then maybe after this meeting, you and I can find a time for us to sit down just ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be
Awesome.
great. I appreciate that. And then do we have to, the finance education?
Yes. I just really wanted to briefly touch on what special education cross-subsidy is, only because there happens to be some language in the House version of their omnibus bill that relates to fully funding special education cross-subsidy, and it's a very popular thing to hear in education right now, and I know we've talked about it maybe a few different times since I came to the district, and in a very high level, special education cross-subsidy was, in the past, the identification of the gap between how much it costs us to support our special education services versus what dedicated special education funding we receive. And so several years ago, there was a small pocket of where the state gave a one-time funding to help cover some of the cross-subsidy, and now we get a small cross-subsidy aid each year, but it is only equal right now to 6.43% of the subsidy, so it's not a lot of what we get. And what we've been hearing at the legislative level, at least on the House side, is that they'd like to eliminate the cross-subsidy and provide that revenue to school districts. At this time, the estimate for the statewide obligation is approximately $750 million per year.
750 million per year.
Yep.
To fully fund special education.
Cross-subsidy.
Cross-subsidy.
Yep. And this is only in relation to state, so keep in mind that there's also that level of federal revenues that we get. So this would just be in relation to comparing what we record as state special education costs versus our state special education revenues that come in. And so they have not provided, they're about a year behind in the public information. So for Duluth Public Schools in fiscal year 2020, our gross cross-subsidy for Duluth Public Schools was just shy of $8.8 million. With the net cross-subsidy, meaning that they have a calculation where some of the additional general education revenue that's associated with our school district would get us to a net cross-subsidy of approximately $7.47 million. So we're at about $7.5 million in cross-subsidy. For 2020, which is the year that we're talking about here, which was announced in July of 2021, so that's kind of why we're a year behind in fiscal years. We saw a little bit of a decline. We actually, in 2018, were almost $9 million if you go back and look at the different cross subsidies, which part of that was the change, if you guys remember, the change in the special education funding. And our story about our cap and our struggles was that we were hitting this ceiling, which was capping how much revenue we got in the special education calculations. And so we weren't getting as much special education revenue as we believed we were entitled to from fiscal years 2016 to 2019. That was what we've been going to the legislature asking for some reimbursement for that. But then in 2020, they basically eliminated that ceiling. So as a school district, we have now been able to get a little bit more special education reimbursable revenue, which has helped us lower that cross subsidy. We're still obviously outpacing our costs versus what we get in revenues, but we're seeing that gap being filled because we're not crashing that ceiling, if you remember that from our discussions from years past. Does that make sense to folks? Yep. So I just wanted to just share generally, we don't really have any predictions or expectations. If you saw the Senate version of their education bill, that is nowhere to be found. So I don't know what our percentage chance of seeing any increase in special education revenue is. Also, as a update, we did not see our specific district language in either bill at this point in time, but you never know what might happen in conference committee or in discussions. But I just kind of wanted to, as a reminder, as we're embarking into the budget season, this is just an area where we continue to see challenges, and we have more and more needs for our special education students and students on IEPs, and so we continue to battle, how those funding pieces happen. So any questions on, just a quick overview of that so that people are aware and we can kind of walk through those pieces of how we can continue to support. And certainly, any revenue from the state would be fantastic. But even if we got to the end where that percentage rate increased from that less than 7% reimbursement to a higher reimbursement would be something that would be very helpful for Duluth Public Schools.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Maybe it's more of a comment, I don't know.
we love comments.
Education Minnesota on Twitter is putting forth a campaign of school districts and how much the House proposal will give school fund, new funds in education to school districts and what the Senate proposal is. And so ours is, supposedly the House proposal would give us $6.3 million more in new funding, but yet the Senate is 0. So is there a prediction on where in the middle that might land, or if it's gonna be closer to 0 or closer to 6, or is it still just anybody's guess?
So I think depending on who you ask about the tea leaves down at the legislature, I would say it's our understanding that we probably will not see much movement. The Senate publicly said that they don't feel that this is a budget year. This is the gap year where it's actually a bonding year. So they don't have as much of an appetite to infuse any omnibus bill with a lot of things. And I don't know if people saw it, but they're supporting literacy funding, and that was about it. There was really just very few things in the Senate version of their companion to the House omnibus education finance bill. So I don't know, but one of those biggest pieces that is in effect there would be the special education cross-subsidy is causing that biggest chunk of what they're representing for each school. So if that goes away, which I kind of suspect it will, the remainder of the House bill gets quite a bit smaller.
And so that was gonna be my follow-up question of if the cross-subsidy that you're talking about is included in the number or not.
It is, yep. And and I do want folks to know we are getting a 2% increase because of last legislative session. They did it on the biennium, so we are getting a 2% increase on the formula allowance or the basic allowance, but that equates to $135 a pupil. So it's about $865,000 for us. Yeah.
A comment and a question. I think having met with, other people did with Senator Chamberlain.
Yes.
He was less than enthusiastic about education in general, even though he's chairman of the education committee. He seemed very unenthusiastic and did not want to spend any money. So I think the Senate is not going to. But my question is, it's the feds that are really not paying their share. They're the ones that mandated all this. What effect would that be if they paid?
So that's a great question, and if we remember, Representative Stauber came and visited the district a couple of years ago, and we were up in Historic Central 318, and we put up a giant chart that showed Duluth Public Schools. I was really grateful for our staff and our print shop to kind of, we've heard for many years that the goal of many of our national level legislators would be that we should be funding 40% of special education. We're at, I believe at the time, which was a couple of years ago, we were at about 5.8% funded by the federal government, and we had some dips and sways depending on the year. Representative Stauber had pledged to try to at least get to 10%, I think was kind of his goal, and that he felt that there was some bipartisan support. I don't think we've seen that. We don't anticipate seeing extra federal funding coming through. And they call this, federal funding gets a little bit complicated because they call it flow through, because states are allocated so much money, and sometimes that stays right at the state level. And then other times, then it flows right through to what they call the LEA, or the local education agency, which is us as a school district. And so sometimes there may be that, oh my gosh, there's more special education, federal special education revenue available. but it never quite trickles down to the individual districts because some of those programs are state-based or they're doing initiatives at the state level. So I agree with you, Dr. Kirby, that we need to continue to recognize the shortcoming of what we thought we would be seeing in terms of the federal level support for special education and how that ultimately impacts our cross-subsidy, because if we don't get that federal level support, we're using our state funds to help pay for those costs, and then when we're capped off on that revenue side, that's what creates the cross-subsidy. So what would be fantastic is if the federal government would commit to paying the cross-subsidy and the state could stay right where it is. That would be a magical miracle for all of us, but that would mean a pretty large investment by the federal government to all schools, including yourselves.
Which, given the cost of one F-35 that you want here, is not much at all. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's a really hard discussion to have because the uniqueness of special education hits different districts differently, and sometimes we try to want to provide one explanation or one set of funding, but what we really need to do is really look at the needs of each district and look at how we can help best support those programs and initiatives and work our way towards making sure that we recognize and identify where those shortcomings are. So I really appreciate the questions, and I appreciate the acknowledgement that we have some ways to go on special education.
Great, thank you. Any questions or any more? We're good? Okay. So now we have enrollment numbers.
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the April projected average daily membership that's in board book, and just as a quick note, as expected, at this time of year, we're actually seeing a slight decline in our projections based on the last couple months that we've been providing information, and this comes from Kateri Little. We're so grateful for all the work that she's doing. We're just slightly under that projection. If you remember back, I believe it was in January, we asked the board to do a revised pupil estimate that we would base our current year budget on. We had originally asked for 8,150 students, and now we're down to 8,005. We're not quite there. We're down to a projected 7,962, and this is again using some assumptions to get us to that end year projection. So we do know that there's some room for some adjustments there. So again, this is, if we think back to pre-pandemic, which is our fiscal year 2020, we were at about 8,370 students. When we finished fiscal year 21, which was June 30th, 2021, we were at about 7,860 students, so we had lost about 500 students unenrolled from the district, and now we're at about 7,962, so we've regained some students, but not as many as we had hoped to see as far as re-enrollments. We have done some initial work with projections for next fall in terms of both staffing and budgeting that we'll be providing to you as board members projections. We are hearing from some of our buildings that our kindergarten projections are up a little bit, but we recognize that some families didn't enroll their students in kindergarten last year, so that's kind of that maybe bumper crop of students coming in. But overall, we're seeing a relatively stable enrollment right now, and not expecting any large re-enrollments at this point.
And the budget has been adjusted to reflect.
We did lower our estimate of what the state would be covering, but if we remember, our resolution for the budget this year is that our ESSER funds would backfill. So we would just be looking at utilizing a little bit more ESSER funding to help make sure our budget balances.
And I think that's one thing for us to remember in all of our conversations, because I think a lot of times people are feeling like we're not necessarily investing as much of our ESSER funding into teaching positions and other positions, but our first big investment was $4 million this year and $4 million for next year to make sure that we can maintain the staffing.
Are we able to project how much the Catholic Diocese High School starting is going to take from us, or is that amount going to be negligible?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We haven't had any specific conversations with the non-public in relation to their secondary. We had some general conversations that they'll be phasing that in by grade level. So it will only be, I think, 2 grade levels starting this fall and then 2 more grade levels in the next 2 subsequent years. I think their enrollment was projected to only be about 25. And keeping in mind that they won't just probably be Duluth Public School students, they could be from our neighboring districts as well. So at this point in time, do we expect that maybe some of those students would be current public school students that will enroll there? Maybe, but it could be just students that maybe would have re-enrolled or enrolled someplace else. So at this time, we haven't been given a specific number, but I think it's not as much of an impact as we would have maybe expected had they rolled out all 4 years at once.
Having their 8th grade students coming from the Holy Lutheran and St. James, is that about 25 a year? You know, I'm not asking for a specific number, but I mean, I know it's pretty low, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure that the loss is huge, even though every student matters.
Every student does matter. I don't have that answer here off the top of my head, but I will get that information and share it with the finance committee.
All right, let me just get my papers all over here. Okay, and then now, thank you for the enrollment report, and we're on to child nutrition.
Yeah, not a whole lot to report other than our continuation of supply chain issues. We are continuing to struggle making sure that we can find suitable substitutions and making sure that we maintain those nutritional standards. We are planning on having a follow-up meeting. I know that for the last school board meeting, one of our students reps had asked about meal sizes and different pieces about that. So we know that we have requirements due to the USDA free lunches. So we'll be getting some information to clarify for board members so that they understand why we have to do what we do because of the regulations and rules related to the USDA. And then, you know, again, just as a reminder, there is language in the House, I believe, to help support and fund meals into next year because that program is going away from the USDA lens. Right now, USDA provides a free type A lunch for every student, but that is set to expire. We do have the summer program that is at our from Myers-Wilkins West, where we do provide free lunches during the summer months. We intend to move forward with that programming again this year. But as of right now, pending anything that changes state legislatively, we would be going back to our former free and reduced lunch model, including paid lunches again, unless there's a legislative change.
Yeah, thank you, because I have been hearing a little bit about that as well, and it would help for clarification in the Eater household too, because my eldest has mentioned it.
Yes.
So that would be great, a great opportunity for us to have some district-wide education.
Absolutely.
And then I just want to do a plug here for jobs open. We have 15, 16, 17, let's say 20-ish, impressed with my math there. Openings at all of our different schools all over the district. So if you're looking to spend time with kids and food, come work for us.
Thank you for saying that.
Okay,
I have a question.
Oh yeah, sorry, Alana.
Do we still provide all the free vegetables that you can eat? Or we used to do that, like, you know, when you had cut carrots and broccoli or whatever, and you can come back and take as much as you want. Does that still happen under USDA?
I'll have to clarify that. I'm not sure that that's part of the USDA program. That might have been a local program that we provided, but let me clarify with Sheila Oak on that piece of it. I can't answer that.
I would hope that, you know, we could offer something like that in addition to, if that's the crux of what it is, you know, free vegetables. They're gonna eat something if they're hungry, so might as well be a vegetable, right?
Yeah.
And as you're mentioning hiring in general, just a day in the life, we spent quite a bit of time this morning partnering with UMD. We've done partnership with College of St. Scholastica as well, talking about how are we getting students involved in these from the education programs, maybe getting them interested in paraprofessional and food service and other positions so that they can work with kids. And we also, as I mentioned, we have a team of people at the state education hiring fair down in the cities right now, Teresa Sepperts and others. So it's definitely something that is part of our daily dashboard.
Did you say Teresa's down at the state education?
Yes,
That's awesome. I just want to make
it's in the cities and it's a big job fair. I don't know if it's actually a state
Yeah.
job fair, but it's kind of it's a statewide job fair.
awesome. Great. All right, thank you. Sorry, Alana, I keep just like moving on. Now we have our facilities department report.
Sure, I'd be glad to go over that. And to start out with, I'd like to say that it's actually a great time of year when we transition from winter to kind of a seasonal change to spring. It doesn't require as much time outside, and it gives our staff time to focus inside and further the cleaning effort. And with COVID kind of subsiding a bit, it's given us some extra time to focus on the buildings, which has been really nice. And in the report, we currently have 137 work orders that were completed this past month, and we have 206 that are open. And work is ongoing in the existing facilities building on the hill. There's been a lot of work completed, and the print shop really likes their new location. They're happy. I'm thinking weather conditions will allow the Denville Tower work to begin again shortly. We're holding off until it's roughly 45 at the coldest at night, but I'm expecting within the next month or so to be going again on that project. The Congdon Park windows have finally arrived. They're in Duluth, and that project that was supposed to have been done last summer will be done this summer, starting on June 10th. And there's a small area of roof at Myers-Wilkins that we're looking at doing. And there is some question if we can get materials, but if we can, we will do it. If we can't, it will be deferred to the next summer. We are moving along with our PSS ponding remediation efforts on the track, and we've sent a final proposal to the contractor, and we're waiting to see what the response will be, but I expect that work to be done this summer. It's general construction tasks and the master plan on the hill. There's been some changes in the project, and we are working every week to develop the plans. And currently, Twin Ports Testing is conducting an asbestos survey in the old Central High School prior to development of the demo plan and demo bid spec. In our building operations department, the operations staff have been performing an excellent job keeping the site safe for students and staff and general public. We do have ongoing vacancies that we are working to fill, and the contract negotiations process has begun with the firemen and others. Under health and safety, the ladders came up this month, and that aspect of the tools that we use have been inspected and replaced as necessary. And Matt was able to complete the hot work program to add to our list of programs on the safety website. And the numbers as identified for March are there, and the year-to-date numbers are included below. I'll open it up for any questions that anybody might have.
What's hot work?
That'd be, let's say there's a steel beam around that window or a header, and I have to weld it. If I'm welding, you need to pull the hot work permit, and that just indicates requirements that have to be followed to prevent fire or damage to other property.
Then how long have we been, I'm trying to think, for as long as I've been on the school board, we've been talking about lane 1 at PSS, haven't we?
It has been a huge challenge. We are going back and forth with the contractor, and I think we're at the point of maybe a stalemate, and we may have to pull this bond and get the work done, pull their bond. But Kathy and I and others have given it our best effort, and we will know what direction we're going within a month, I would think.
Okay. And is that involved, is this gonna involve bringing legal representation, or we already passed?
We are
right
in
past
legal
that.
representation.
Okay. Good. I mean, not good, but.
Yeah.
And I think if it looks current openings, does it sound right about 3 maintenance transportation? Does that sound about right, or is it even more than
No,
that?
we have more if you look at custodial maintenance.
Oh, okay, all right.
I have a question about the STC building, is that getting torn down too?
No.
Is that part of the plan? So that's always gonna remain standing?
STC main will remain standing, the very front building, and the back STC annex that's the building being renovated right now.
Yeah, I meant the front.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we hoping that it gets reused, is that?
That's our goal, and we believe that will occur.
Perfect. Speaking of ponding, if there's ponding on the tennis courts, so is that an issue that has happened here before?
Are you talking about the
The
tennis
ones
courts?
that are
Arthur? That's there's been slight ponding there since they were constructed a decade ago. It's not
So
really,
that's not a thing with the track, it's not like,
no,
it saw the track getting attention, so it decided to pond it,
It's
so.
a whole different scenario.
Good to know, all I know is that coating's expensive, that's what I was, I remember that discussion, so.
Right.
I do want to add from a health and safety perspective, we received some preliminary information that our workers' comp renewal that will happen in the summer is most likely going to go down. So we're very excited about maybe some cost savings. I don't have the details yet, but our rating, our 3-year average, and I know that over time when we talked about that, we had a year in 2017 where we had some really high claims, and that is falling off. So our 3-year average is going to become a smaller average. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you in the next couple months. But that's a part of our health and safety and our workers' comp and our education piece. So in the midst of seeing some things going up in price or more expenditures, this is another good news thing where we hope to see some reduction in our workers' comp.
That's great. Good job.
I think you all pass that on to Matt, he's worked really hard.
Yeah, Pat, please. And then I just want to take a minute just to acknowledge that we have a letter here from, from Greg Fulmer to talk about updating our central high school property. So it's back on the market. There's marketing and advertising in place, and he has these website advertising listed, which is LoopNet, Minnesota Association of Commercial Realtors, gregfulmer.com, crixie.com, social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So we're back up and running marketing that property. So that's good news.
And I have a question about that, being that just this week I saw the news of Emily Larson giving tours to the University of Minnesota hospital people around town trying to look at sites for building their hospitals. I'm really hoping that Greg or somebody from the district is approaching her about steering them our way for that hill property, because I think that's a perfect match for a campus like that. So I really hope somebody's talking to somebody. Otherwise, if I need to do it, let me know.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure that Greg Fulmer is made aware that there's some community interest in looking for some viable properties.
Great. Thank you. All right, now we have did we do transportation? No, we did not.
Technology.
Technology, what am I? Oh, I flipped them. So our technology report, I got my 2-factor authentication today.
That's good.
Yes. I can't put my calendars together, but that's okay.
So this is for a March report, March 1st to the 22nd. I'll start off with the cybersecurity. For Google security, we had 1.1 million emails accepted, which is a little less than we had last month. 33,000 emails were rejected, which is down from last month as well. 57,000 emails were identified as spam. 4.1 were identified as phishing. 7.5 were identified as spoofing. 0 emails were identified as malware this last month. And I put little arrow indicators that I felt if it's trending down or up and how that looks, so you actually know.
Those are super helpful, thank you.
We have 10,617 active accounts, which is up a little bit. More storage this month as well. We have, 294 That should be 1,000 files shared, missing a K there. 243 suspicious login attempts, 1.3 failed login attempts that last month. And our data loss prevention identified 29 high severity incidences that were blocked by Google Drive. For technology e-rate bids or RFPs, we have done, and go on the technology help desk tickets for that time period. 457 new technology tickets were created, 415 tickets were resolved, 487 tickets remain unresolved, which is up. 197 of them are due to Chromebook repairs. Right now it's 209, so that's even a little higher now this time. The average response time was 14 hours and 54 minutes. The average resolution time was 84 hours on that. And that's due to the increase in number of Chromebooks waiting to be repaired at this time.
Are those student Chromebooks or just kind of a mix of everybody's
Mostly
Chromebooks?
students,
Okay.
but it's across the board.
Okay.
So it's staff and students. For our projects, at the CDWG wireless validation survey, that's to support our blended learning. So that was completed. Actually, we just met with the person from CDWG to go over the findings, and we'll be presenting those in the future meeting. Duluth Training Brothers will be on site next week, starting to install the K-2 classroom smart boards or AV upgrades. They're going to start at Lowell. I think Lowell's going to probably take that whole week. They only have one crew up, and they're estimating 3 to 4 hours per board, and Lowell has 17 classrooms to do.
And are these did we get all of the pieces for our smart boards? Because I know we were waiting for all those pieces, or are we still for some of them?
All of them are in, except for the mobile stands. We haven't received those mobile stands yet, and that would be going down to Nathan's program, Nathan Wilkes.
Okay.
AEO.
At AEO.
So we're waiting for those ones to.
But this is different from last month where we were missing pieces.
We were waiting, yep.
Yeah,
The
okay.
rest of the parts arrived earlier in the month, all the AV cables and stuff like that. That was the last piece.
Good.
And if you guys have any questions.
We've been hearing a lot of those teachers have been clamoring for the smart board stuff, so this is great to hear that everything is there.
Yeah. And one of the updates that the installation team had is they're going to work the second shift, which will really reduce the impact for our host teachers.
That's
We're
great.
real happy with that.
Thank you, Bart, for all the flexibility and support that you're doing with the team with the schools.
Thank you, Bart. All right, so now we move on to the transportation.
Yep, the transportation report is in board book, and just wanted to highlight a couple things. One is we did have 2 drivers going through our training program where we had done conditional hiring. And as you can see in the notes, unfortunately, one of them went through the training process and then actually left the district after training. So that was unfortunate for us, but that's part of what happens when a district provides training to get support staff to join our team. One of the other things I wanted to note was this ELDT program for entry-level drivers. These is a training approach for new drivers that they have to follow and have protocol. And so Steve Johnson, our transportation manager, has been doing a lot of that, he's doing our training. He is coordinating and collaborating with other school districts. There hasn't been a lot of guidance for districts to be able to provide that at a state level, so he's been working with colleagues to make sure, and then also he's actually providing some support for Voyagers, so that every new driver has to do this regardless of whether you're a district or a contractor, so we are appreciating that collaboration. So just wanting our board to know that that's just kind of been an extra add-on duty and responsibility for our transportation team. And then we had a special education school bus that we had an engine fail, and we had reviewed the option of, either just replacing the bus because of the engine, but we ended up replacing the engine because that specific school bus was gonna take almost 12 months to get replaced because of supply chain issues, and so it's not something we would normally do, is to reinvest in an engine into an older bus, but in order for us to support our students and to support the routes that we needed, Steve was able to creatively find a way to get that done, and we were able to get that installed. So you can see that in the note, and I am so appreciative of Steve and his willingness and creativity. We, as you know, for the last couple of years have done a combination of purchasing some new buses, but also purchasing newer used buses to leverage what budgeted dollars we have for those bus replacement cycles, because when I came to the district, we were way behind on the bus replacement because due to budget constraints and challenges that the district had, they had not purchased new buses and the cycle had fallen behind. And so we are slowly but surely catching up, and so I'm always appreciative of Steve and his team being creative about that. So, and then we continue to do just our regular routine maintenance. And again, we always put at the bottom what our average mileage is, and as we keep replacing and trying to find those better buses and new buses, then that helps that average mileage goal for our buses to go down.
Does the replacement of the engine, it makes the mileage better, but not the year of the bus better? Is that, how does that go?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so basically the frame and the work, the bus itself is older, but the engine is really excited about being here, so.
Hey, I'm all for making it work.
Yeah.
All right, so now we move on to our recommended resolutions, and these resolutions will not be on the consent agenda. Thank you, Member Alana.
Hey,
So
my name.
that's, so now we'll go ahead and look at, and the first one we have is HR-4-22-3874, which is approval of our paraprofessional employment employees collective bargaining agreement. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
So there are just resolutions right now that are shown as placeholders, and you will receive those contracts prior to the school board meeting.
Great.
So we don't have those posted here on.
And do we have a summary of what those
Teresa will provide a summary outline of each one of those agreements.
Okay. So we have that one, then we have HR-4-22-3881, which is approval of the Duluth Federation of Teachers Collective Bargaining Agreement as a placeholder as well.
Correct.
Just take a minute and soak that in. We have, it doesn't get old saying that we've reached this collective bargaining agreement through a lot of work on both sides. So I want to thank you, everybody from the district who was involved in making this happen. I think it was a super productive, fruitful negotiation, and I also want to thank Ethan and the Duluth Federation of Teachers. I think we worked collectively. We had disagreements, but we resolved them in a manner in which is to be commended, and I'm just really proud of how the negotiation went, and I'm proud of all of you. So thank you.
I'm grateful for our team as well as the collaboration from our bargaining units. I think that we have, as we said, we have come to some positive resolutions, and I think as we work with our other units, we'll start to see similar positive resolution. I also know we have, in addition to the other units we talked about, we do have some individual contracts, and just looking at the work of, we talked about at the committee of the whole, the work that Assistant Superintendent Bonds has done, but also thinking about the great body of work that CFO Erickson has done over the past several years. Working on those contracts in the near future with the board will be important for us to ensure that we can keep our high quality candidates in their positions.
There was something else super profound I was going to say, but it just fluttered out of my head. But thank you all, seriously, that was a lot of, when did we start? That's what I was thinking about.
August of 2021.
Yep, we started in August of 2021, and we came to the agreement in March.
Mhm.
So it was quite a few months of work, but it was productive and fruitful, so I'm proud of that. Next, we have a resolution. Right.
And actually, I think our tentative agreement was in February?
Yeah. it
We
might
had a
have been.
TA, they didn't vote until after our school board meeting in March, so
True.
we weren't able to put it on the March meeting. That's why we're here.
That was it.
Weird, that's
Yep.
why we're here in April.
Yep.
But the hard work sort of got finished in February.
Yep.
Great. And then the next we have on the agenda is the acceptance of donations to the Duluth Public Schools, and we have 17 donations from a variety of people from all over Duluth, whether it's a foundation or whether it's individuals. And again, it's just really important to thank those individuals for their donations.
And just as a reminder, sometimes our building clericals who provide this reporting mechanism through the district to the business office, sometimes they put in a whole bunch at the same time, so they might have been received, say in the last month or so. So sometimes you see them kind of come in where I'm seeing a lot of Ordine East happening right now, and I think that sometimes it's just, it happens as they report. So we have a lot of activity and donations that happen throughout the year, even though some months look a little bit less than others, then we see some of these bigger donation months, and that's just as they have time to report.
And one I just kind of want to point out is the Lincoln Park donation that had to do with the ski club. My son partook in that great opportunity to go out after school on Wednesday to Mont du Lac, where they got ski rentals, or if needed they had clothing, and they learned how to ski and they had a blast. They were out there for about 3 hours every Wednesday, and my son came back just pumped every single time and talked about just how much fun it was to see his friends out there skiing, and they were well behaved, or as well behaved as middle schoolers are out in public, right, which is a different standard, but that they just had a great time. And I think it was really meaningful, and it's important that all of our students get to experience outdoor life in Duluth, and skiing is just a great way for students to do that. So that was just a fantastic program. I hope we get to do that again. All right, let's see, moving on next. Placeholders for redistricting, all that, polling
Yes.
places, all that. Do you want to speak to that?
I do. Right now, we don't have anything to provide for you tonight. We are still working on some final recommendations. This was a little more complicated than we originally thought because of how the city provided some of their adjustments to their precincts. So just as a brief overview for folks, as a school district, we have the entire city of Duluth, which the city of Duluth has 5 wards, and within those wards, they have precincts within their wards. And then,
They're not words.
5, whatever they call them, they have
Precincts. They're not
precincts.
yeah.
Well, they actually have 35, whatever designations
Well, right,
they have. They have all these little ones, and then they have larger capacities. And then we also, as Duluth Public Schools, have the city of Rice Lake, which formerly was a township but is now a city, and then 4 more townships in addition to those. And so we have to collectively take those in addition to the city of Duluth. We have 4 wards that we have to then take all of those voters and compile them into 4. So we don't have we don't have the same as the city does, where we could just use them, because in addition to them not having a different amount, we also have the additional outside of the city limits that we have to add in. So we will be sending a memo to all board members so that everyone receives it together with the proposal and recommendation based on the work that Brett Mensing in our business services office has been taking the lead on this, and he's been doing a fantastic job. And we've been in regular contact with both the county and the city to make sure that we're following all the rules, because if it ends up that we do not need to change our boundaries at all, we would be recommending that, but there may be some minor changes. Right now is kind of what we're predicting, is that there may need to be some adjustments. The goal has to be that each one of our designated wards is about the same population as each other, and over 10 years there's actually been some changes for us So we are recognizing that we may have to do some adjustments.
Do you think this will come forward for the April meeting?
It will.
Okay.
It is, we have to by statute, have the board approve it by April 26th. So that would be our night, but we hope to have that within the next couple days. We were hoping to have something for tonight, but both Brett and I felt like we weren't at a point where we could give that final recommendation. So we hope to provide that to the board here in the next couple of days.
And so for people reading the agenda and you see approve new boundaries, we're talking about where you vote,
Voting,
Yes.
yes.
not
Yes.
school boundaries, which is a completely different, we're not springing that on anybody. We're
Yes, thank
that
you.
we're-
Right.
We just have some boundary changes too.
Yeah, just gonna slide those through.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what had happened was they kind of took the templates from 10 years ago when this happened, and I think this will actually be one resolution that will have the different component pieces rather than 3 separate resolutions is what we think is gonna happen. But we'll be providing that clarification before the April 26th board meeting. But thank you for reminding folks who might be seeing that.
Now, will the board get a chance to actually make a difference in this, or are we just going to get a fait accompli?
We will be providing you a recommendation before the meeting, and any board member that would like to provide feedback on that certainly can before we get the final recommendation. We hope to have a recommendation that you can approve on April 26th, but if we need to have prior discussion or modifications of that, we would be working out from feedback from the board.
Under what circumstance would we have to rerun for our seats if the boundaries change much?
At this time, I do not think there's any designation that would move a sitting board member from the representation that they currently have.
We're at large. It's you, Kirby, you gotta worry.
Well, there are some, I mean, those of us who have been there enough to know there are some streets and changes that people that don't do this may think is nothing, but it can actually be quite significant.
Yes.
So that's why I think that there's some people that really want to see this before it's.
For sure, and to know that the city of Duluth did do some minor changes in a couple of their areas, so they did change some of their individual boundaries. They didn't change their overall, I'm not sure what we're calling them, of the 5 designated
They're
areas.
Districts.
Yep, districts, their 5 districts, they did not do any major changes, but within their precincts, they did like collapse 1 and spread it out between 2, and then they had some minor street changes to keep their precincts within targets that they have, but when you look at all their data, they're not the same. Like they have some precincts that have 4,000 people and some precincts that have 1,100 people. So I don't know the methodology behind theirs, but then collectively they have a total amount that makes sense. So, but we will be providing that through district communication.
That's great. And do you have any idea, just so, when for some board members to go ahead and look out for some of that information on the boundary changes? I'll call it board voting changes.
Yeah. To come out. I hope to have it in the next couple of days.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Next, we have a resolution to approve clarification of trail easement on Central on the Hill property.
This was a late add-on, so there is, it did get uploaded to board book, a simple resolution. We had a request from the city of Duluth. We have a trail easement on the Central property, so there is a dirt trail that runs on the lower side of the Central property that people can use. The city had asked if we could provide some more specific clarification on some of the details related to where the trail is. So this is not changing anything. There's no material changes to the easement. They just asked if we could provide that clarification that the school board recognizes that we would be continuing that easement in its current form, but with a little bit more detail and clarification. We are still working on getting the actual adjustment of the trail easement. Dave Spooner and our attorneys have been working with the city of Duluth and Danielle Urjevec to get that clarified. So we would be asking the board to approve that the school board chair would approve and sign that once we don't actually have the document yet. And so the city had requested that the board just go through the process of approving that we are going through this clarification process, but there is no material change to it. But then if we do, in the event that the property is sold, then that easement and the responsibility of that easement would transfer to the new property owner.
Does the easement, detail specifically where it is and throughout the property, or
Yes,
when we
it's
sell it?
exactly where it is.
So like the buyer, whoever purchases the property can't move it to accommodate more?
They can work with the city to adjust the location or where the easement lies.
I pulled up on my phone with my mountain biking map.
And any other questions? Good. Okay, so to move on for items that we're gonna find on the consent agenda will be the HR staffing report. So we're looking at our retirements, resignations, all those fun things. Okay, so got that. Then we also have approval of the Google Workspace administered job description. That's a placeholder right now. We don't have that yet.
Correct.
Okay.
I had a question about the staffing.
Oh, sorry, Alana.
I just realized it. I just saw a certified resignation that I'm curious about, and I know Teresa's not here, I don't know if it's okay to talk about that in an open meeting. But
Probably not unless it's,
but the name is public, right?
well, if it's public. it will.
On this document.
Sure.
Like, so Jackie Ward is leaving us?
Jackie Ward is leaving us. She has a new job opportunity as a director of special education for a cooperative, I believe in the Detroit Lakes area. But Fergus Falls. Yeah.
And so are we planning on replacing that position or diluting it or anything like that?
We're having conversations about what that will entail. Our assumption is that it will probably be replaced in some format, but as we look at new structure and things overall, we have to determine the needs. Sorry. That was a benign question. I was like, what's she gonna do?
Is the April 1st date still being held? Is everybody clear that that's the date that people have to notify the district?
For retirements?
That's
So,
been a problem.
so the district has an April 1st to provide the retirement structure that we have in terms of payments. The district can always accept resignations after April 1st, but then we are not subject to provide, say, the payment timeline can change and how the disbursements of the retirement can happen. So I would suspect that we may see some additional retirements after April 1st, even though that would just mean that there's a chance that the process would be delayed a year if they choose to retire after that date.
Great, okay. Good, Alana? David?
Yep.
Go.
And then I'm going through the cobwebs of my mind. I believe the assistant director of special ed position is posted already, so I'm assuming we're looking at it in the same fashion. I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
That's
All right, and then also next, as we talked about approval of the Google Workspace Administrator job description, and we'll see that before the meeting. Yep, school board. What does a Google Workspace Administrator job do?
Please say Google.
Yeah,
A lot of Google.
a lot of Google.
A lot of Google.
A lot of Googling.
So with the addition of the blended learning one-to-one, we increased our Chromebooks and our Google support by quite a bit. We went from 3,000 devices to 12,000 devices. So we have to manage all those devices as well as manage all the users in there. So in the past, James has been doing that since 2010, but it's kind of overwhelming for him to do that. So we're going to split those jobs out. So we have a person dedicated to doing our cloud Google stuff. And it includes the backups, all the backups of our Google Drives and all the services that go along with it, our SysCloud, stuff that's related to Google.
Great. Thank you, because what this makes me think about is that we're building the infrastructure that we need to support blended learning in our students. So this is really important. I'm sure you're very happy about it.
I am very happy.
Good. And will it help kind of spread workload out, allow us?
It will, because
Okay.
right now, the person who's doing that, James, he's doing all of our Microsoft SACM, which is basically the equivalent of Google.
Yep.
We've been doing that for a long time, so that takes care of all of our desktops, all of our images for our desktops, and stuff like that. And now, that position split, that's gonna.
Great. Thank you. Next, we have our finances, which is our financial report.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
It's in your board book.
Sure is.
So to highlight, at the bottom of this report, I like to highlight the finances that we've spent so far in our SO2 funds, a little over 5 million. And so I give you a monthly amount there. And in Fund 6, which is our bond project, building project, we've spent a little over 3.8 million. And then I'm tracking for you the student activity, revenue and expenses, but I'm going to change that a little bit next month and report a more accurate, truly extracurricular and student activity accounts there. And we're trending nicely, and the finance department is busy handling little audits here and there for MDE for various programs in the district, and we're busy with lots of accounts payable and contracts being settled, so it's been a busy time.
Yeah. And the student activities, this is what we talked about at the last business in HR, right? Where you doing the and the way that we've changed the way this goes
and
through.
that project is we're done. All the
Okay.
banks have been closed, and we've moved everything into Skyward. I'm thrilled about all of that. And yes, I mean, I'm having principals come to my office and we sit and have a one-on-one. We're going out, Sheila and we're going out to the sites. And, Kathy has been involved in some Google Meets with me to help educate, and we're getting there. I think we have a couple pieces to, like transportation and whatnot, trying to work out those pieces because they're done so differently now.
Yeah.
And we're getting there, and everyone's been very cooperative, and, it's a change. It's a big change after 30 years, but we're doing it. So they're
And
good.
then just a question, so the student activities, is it like, do we operate at a deficit in there, or is it supposed to balance expenses and revenue?
So it's a great question. So
I'll let Mike.
couple things. So there's, when we talk about student activities and then we talk about, say, activities and athletics, we have two separate things that happen in our district. So we have the school funded and school sponsored events like our athletics and our extracurricular activities, our student activity accounts. And now because of what the state requirements were to create this in our district systems and have reserve accounts for them, they need to manage their own money to make sure that we don't have anyone going into deficit. So we actually have fund balances in our student activities, meaning that groups have maybe fundraised and they're going to use it for a specific thing. So we may be carrying balances. Okay. But we want to just remind folks that it is not the intention for us to collect a whole bunch of money and hold it. It's actually intended to be spent. So our goal and our hope is that when we are collecting dollars or we get revenues, that there is intentionality on making sure that we spend it down. And one of the overarching things, and I know Simone can attest to this, that we hear from the Department of Education, student activities are supposed to be about the students and decided by the students. These should not be teacher pots of money or activities directors pots of money. These are supposed to be driven by the students. A lot of our activity accounts are related to fundraising for like Wolfridge, for example. So some of our grade levels have funds or pots, but they're doing that for a specific purpose. So we just feel, and as a reassurance, I know we've talked about this before, all of the money that were kind of in our old systems transferred here. There wasn't a loss of funds. Simone and her team were very intentional about re-recognizing those funds so that now they have Skyward reports that they can look at and see where their balances are, what they've spent in those accounts, and that we manage those together so that there is that level of transparency that we can provide the Department of Education, because this was ultimately a directive by the Department of Education to say we want to see that in your approved finance systems such as Skyward here.
Thank you.
Did that help?
Yes, that's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. You said it
So
right there.
when principals have, little savings accounts, little pots of money to spend on like, you know, family nights or whatever it is, or, you know, the cake you get after, you know, honor night or something like that, where is that included in the budget?
So it could be in a couple different places. So we do have building level administrative like supply budgets or oversight budgets. So they may be using some of that as discretionary decision making depending on if that has a public purpose, or if there is in coordination with a program or a teacher or a department. It may be in a student activity account where they've either received a donation or they're fundraising to do something like that specifically, then that would run through a student activity account. But again, that needs to be formulated for and by the students. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. You always hear horror stories of, you know, budget crunching time when budget cuts have to be made and you know, a principal was trying to save up to buy something and all those funds are taken away suddenly, those kinds of things.
So and you are exactly right. When I came to the district, there were stories that I heard, and when we were in some financial challenges, we did say, for example, our instructional budgets did not carry over. If you didn't spend your money, it went back into the pool, and then we redistributed those things. But we are working with our building leaders right now to make sure that we're intentional about if there's a specific purpose, and they've designated that they're saying that, oh gosh, I'm gonna save money for 2 years because I have this project a year from now. We're working with our teams to make sure that those are recognized and put into assigned accounts so we don't lose track of them.
And I think one thing that we've talked about too is once we're and we are on a more stable financial path, but once we get into a great place, we'll be thinking about you know, having standardized replacement cycles for things so that people aren't having to squirrel away pots of money so that they can buy a new stove for the family consumer in the classroom or something.
Yeah, it's a dream.
And then also thinking about, and I know we all think about it, is our technology infrastructure and how we're gonna think about building a budget around our technology infrastructure. That looks similar to how we maintain our physical spaces.
Yeah. But I'm getting teared up.
I know.
I have one more question. Knowing that there was a finance employee that came and talked to us at the our school board meeting last month, I just wanted to check in and make sure that she's been checked on and things are happening there, and that she's feeling more comfortable.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep. We had some great conversation.
good. I appreciate that. Because, yeah,
Oh,
it's hard to come before us and expect, you know, some consequences or something. But I know times are tough and she's working a lot of doing the job of many people. So I'm glad that, I'm hopeful anyway that we can spread that out a little bit.
We appreciated the information, and Simone was fantastic about reaching out and having some further conversation. And I think we can safely say that our finance team has been more cohesive than I've seen it here since I've been here at the district, and that is a large testament to Simone and her leadership of that department and that team really coming together. I can't tell you what a difference it's been here in the last just a little over a year.
Last week, 1 year.
1 year last week for Simone, everybody.
Happy anniversary.
yeah, right.
Thank you.
So, great, anything else? And now we move on to budget revisions.
Yes, and that is also in board book. It's 40 pages long.
Yeah.
But we're doing a lot of co-transfers at this time. This is the time of year that we do cleanup, title, compensatory. And then the MDE sends us a list of not code permitted combinations, so then we have to go clean up before year end. And I mean, mid-year, they could say, you know, this program doesn't work with this finance code. We get pages upon pages. So now, instead of waiting now till June, we're encouraging us to do that now, so we are not faced with, you know, a big giant project in June. So you're gonna see probably more and more of that, and it's 40 pages long.
And this is just cleaning up
Budget codes.
budget codes.
Yes, and not, I wouldn't say 100% of them, but I'd say probably 90% of them, but we do transfers if a school calls me and is unsure how to do something, they wanna move something from one object code to another, I help with that, and part of that is too, just helping the site so they can spend in the appropriate budget line. But it's mostly cleanup right now.
Okay, because this is longer than what I
Yes,
thought. Okay.
we've been hitting it hard.
There's
That's
been
great.
a lot of
40
internal
pages.
work that we appreciate. This may oftentimes happen in the summer, even
Yeah.
after the fiscal year is over. We'll do the code corrections and cleanup, but we're trying to get a little ahead of that. And then just to a reminder that with our ESSER funding and our ESSER expenditures, we have actually received multiple new smaller grants through, you heard from special education, received some ARP funds. We've had some individual entitlements come to Duluth Public Schools that are smaller amounts. And what we've been doing is kind of utilizing this, what we call Finance Code 155, which has been our ESSER 2 code. And so we just haven't had all of those new codes set up yet, so we'll be doing some code transfers to recognize that they all fall into the right pots. So we'll be seeing some of that too, but again, it's the expenditure needs to happen, and then we do that cleanup to make sure we're in alignment with what we report back to the state.
That's great. Thank you.
And they do look at it.
Yeah.
Oh, MAE looks at it.
Yeah.
They're our new best friends right now.
I'm glad they look at them. I
Oh,
mean, we
they-
want to be responsible with the money that we get from our taxpayers, so
They
thank
do,
you for
they
that.
check it.
That's great. No fundraisers?
So this month, we just didn't have any internally reported. I don't necessarily think that means we haven't had any fundraisers
Yeah.
going on, but I would suspect maybe next month and especially the month after that, we'll see.
We'll see them all come
Yep.
in. Let's see, then we're into bids, RFPs, quotes, we have none there. Contracts, change orders, and leases, none there. And now we move on to miscellaneous informational items, no action required. So we have pending our FY23 budget information, that's gonna all start coming.
Yep, we'll be providing that prior to the April 26th meeting, and then we'll be doing a short review at the April 26th school board meeting to give you that first lens approach, and then we'll be working with the board to schedule our May and June committees of the whole, so we can go into more in-depth and excitement of charts and graphs related to our budget for 2023.
And then moving on, we have our district property updates. Right, or am I from?
Yep, and I think what happened, and this happened maybe a month or two ago, is that the Greg Palmer piece got moved into the facilities report, but it's actually, I think, part of the district
The
property
district
update
property,
too. Yep.
okay. And this is just what it is, okay. And then expenditure contracts?
Yeah, we had a pretty good list of individual expenditure reports, contracts that were signed in the month of March, and just open for any questions folks might have in related to those lists.
I have a question about the fleet.
Mhm.
We pay an awful lot of money for the audit. If we had our own internal auditor, would it be the same, or would we still be paying with?
We would still be paying with fleet.
You
have to-
that.
We have to have an external audit. Part of that is that we have to have an independent audit. We did talk through, we had an agreement, this is the last year of a,
Upcomings are last year.
yep, so then we will go out for bids, an RFP. This is professional services, so we do not have to do a bid process, but we'll be seeking and seeing if that we want to continue with this. I will say that if you were to look at other organizations our size, we've actually seen higher amounts than this for other districts and the costs of auditing. We, having a new finance team, we did work with Winfrey a little bit closer to get more in alignment with the protocols and procedures that they wanted to see versus some of the prior standard practices that we had as a district. So we did appreciate their support and their willingness to help us again through this year, and we're trying to be proactive to get a little bit of ahead of the process, but we look forward to having that conversation, hopefully moving forward, that maybe we would look at making sure we can save some money there.
And next would be no cost contracts, we have nothing there. And moving on to revenue contracts.
We have one Pathways to Prosperity Duluth Adult Education. Angie Frank and her team did receive a revenue contract to provide a workforce needs, so they get money and then their teams help support the work of workforce. So this is a revenue contract where they'll be receiving some funds.
So they'll be receiving some payment?
Yep.
Perfect. Next, we have grant applications.
I just want to say how much appreciation I have for Kayla Carroll in the Assistant Superintendent's Office. She manages both our grant applications and grant approval processes. We reinstituted our grants committee. It had kind of gone dormant during the pandemic and with the transition of different leadership. So we're excited to be able to report more of our grant applications in advance. As you know, we are providing this kind of preliminary, here's what people are applying for. Some of them are grants that they've already been told they're gonna get, but several of our grants are competitive, so they may or may not be the recipient. And then subsequently, when we find out, then those go on the grant award portion of our school board meeting. So these are just those that are grant applications that we've walked through as a grant team. That includes technology, facilities, finance, and then our assessment coordinator, because a lot of our grants require some evaluative or data work, so we want to make sure. So we just walk through them to make sure that we know the district understands what the obligations are. Are there other obligations related to the grant that may cost the district money? Is there matching funds or matching in kind that we know that we're going to be responsible for? So excited about the work that Kayla has been coordinating on our behalf to share with you. So then subsequently in when we get the grant acceptance, then you find those on this agenda as well.
Couple I just wanted to point out was on the grant at Lincoln Park for PBIS to continue that work. I have a bunch of ROAR paraphernalia around my house, and it's great. I think it's great to see that. And then $162,000 for non-exclusionary discipline training and support grant for FY22. And just to talk a little bit about this, this is important because we're working to promote positive school climate, reduce our out-of-school suspensions for our students, and I really want to point that piece of that out. We're really working diligently to make sure that our students are in the classroom where they can have access to instructional time and not lose that time out of class, and to build an equitable and inclusive school models for responding to student behavior. So I think I just wanted to point that out after some of the feedback we've been getting from the community, that we are working diligently to make sure our schools are equitable and inclusive for our students. Especially, we know we have problems in disciplinary processes, so we are being intentional about how we're doing that work. So I'm happy to see this. That's for about $162,000. Also looking at a summer grant for summer arts, cultural SEL, and academic support grants from Northland Foundation to work for summer arts for our students. And then we learned earlier about our evidence-based quality intervention practices and innovation, a quick grant that's going to be fantastic for our littlest scholars, the 0 through 2. And then one that I thought was really cool was on the last page, MAELC Strategic Innovation Grant that looks at Denfeld, that looks at designing small-scale hydroponic plant systems. That's pretty cool. So I just wanted to point those grants out.
I think also the teams behind those grants, I mean, think this totals, if everything comes through, about $400,000. And the competitive nature of funding some of the work that we do is incredibly important. And I think that when you're pointing out some of these aren't just random grabs at certain things, they're very strategic, like focusing on mental health, focus on early childhood, focus on disproportionality, and I'm grateful to our teams, both the financial team and the teaching and learning team for all the work that they've done.
Absolutely. And I think we have no change orders to sign, we have no referrals to the policy committee, so I think that concludes, Alana, am I good?
And just one
Thanks for
other question about going back to facilities. Given higher interest rates and all of that, how much interest is there actually? Everybody's optimistic about selling property on the hill, but all I hear is everybody's optimistic. Is there actually anything going on?
Yes, we were looking forward to sharing some more information as soon as we are able to.
Soon as they're able to.
It's very vague. I'm not.
We have interest in the property.
Okay.
We have serious interest in the property. We have not been able to finalize or determine, but we look forward to sharing some information with the school board very soon.
Okay,
Great,
thanks. It's good enough.
Yes.
good Alana? Okay, all right. I think that concludes our HR Business Service Committee at 6:11 today.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.